Hello, I'm Mary Reese, the Director of Special Projects at NJ, PSA, and FEA, and I'm delighted to welcome to our fall conference our keynote speaker this morning, Consuelo Castillo, Kickbusch. She's here today to have a chat about her life with us, with you and with us, and she's my new friend.
Yes, absolutely.
And she loves to hug as well.
Yes,
so.
that's true.
One of the things that we talked about informally was your feelings about principles, and you also highlighted that in your presentation today. Can you speak a little bit about that with our members?
I believe, just from being in over 1,000 districts now in the last 20 years as an advocate for children, that the educational leader, the true change agent is the principal. That wonderful person has an opportunity, I believe, to create a culture. And it starts with their own looking inside of themselves as to what are their beliefs, what are their values, what are their goals. And of course, as leaders that they are, they have to be visionary. But I think that when you work with, and given the opportunity, that's why I say opportunity, Mary, when you're given the opportunity to bring together staff of any different backgrounds, and that it really points to this principle. I have a lot of respect for superintendents and administrators, and certainly they play a critical role in the educational system. But to me, the change agent, the person that steers this vessel, the individual that creates a culture that fosters learning, that empowers, is the principal. A very special responsibility. I also like to consider them the freedom fighters. As you know, I'm a veteran, and I got medals for courage. I got medals for performance. Principals don't. They're there because I believe they go from the professional to the personal. So more than ever, this country needs, and certainly what your organization does, is very critical in my opinion, particularly in the development and giving them the tools and understanding. In the Army, professional development for me was over a span of 5 years in those 20 years. So I believe that what your vision and what you're trying to do to empower and to make sure that the toolkit that they have is equipped and full of all the possibilities that they can use. So I say to all of the educational leaders to give yourself this gift and take this step to not believe or accept that you have to do it all on your own. It really is crucial for them to invest in their learning as principals. Absolutely.
You know, one other thing you talked about was importing peace.
Yes.
And we're big proponents here at PSA and FEA of social emotional learning. Why don't you talk about, your involvement in that regard?
Well, as I go around the world in different capacities, they always thank us, the Americans, for being the ones who responded, the first responders, the ones who advocated for inclusion and equity, the ones who heard the cry and did something about it. So when I talk about importing peace, children at the beginning of their lives are at the mercy of parents. And as I told my story, there were demons, there were challenges and struggles that affected how I responded to life emotionally and socially. And I didn't know how to translate that hurt, or how to cope with it, or how to understand trauma in such a way that I could continue with my life journey. So I think a lot of times in the educational system, we don't stop long enough to have this conversation that you and I are having, and that is the relevance and its place of social emotional learning. Everyone, because principals and everyone is held on an accountability scale about the IQ, test scores. the data points. But what about the well-being of our young people? And I am here to say, just from working with over 1 million children, if we can help build from within their social, emotional, if we can, even if that well is dry from abuse, from neglect, from low-level educational, whatever the factors are, I believe that socially, emotionally, we have an obligation equally to the academic responsibility of preparing a child that holistically will enter this world with a lot of promise and with a lot of hope. And I would dare say, I don't know, Mary, if you would agree, that if we invest in the social emotional, the IQ will tend to fall in place.
We agree wholeheartedly.
Because I've seen it.
No, absolutely.
I have seen children, we have worked with children who were told, were at the low end of the spectrum, either had an absenteeism problem, behavioral problem, or were not making the grades. And by building them up socially and emotionally, we have come back to do the follow-up. And the first thing kids tell me, and I just love it because they are in such a good place, they'll say things like, Colonel Kickbusch, guess what? And I go, what? Look, can't you see? I've got my hair out of my face. And that's part of what they equate to feeling good about themselves, their well-being. I'll have another young lady tell me, I've done so well that really my mother thinks that a spaceship took me and did something with me. And I think it's just because they just like, are you the same kid? And I tell them, well, that they might not understand what has happened to you, but what it is, it's social and emotional, and it's very key. I believe it's a precursor, I think, to all the other academic requirements.
Well, we wholeheartedly agree with you.
Oh, I'm
because
so
we have
happy you did.
many programs around culture and climate
Mm.
through FEA, and that's something that we're very supportive of. One of the other things, though, related to this is you obviously are very connected with your family, and you said that you're doing work through your institute with families, not just with educators and students. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Thank you for asking me. This happened because I traditionally would go to parent conferences, and I was always pegged as the keynote speaker. And it was at a parent conference in Los Angeles that a group of parents had formed a coalition and wanted to speak to me about their needs. And I thought parent conferences met those needs. I learned through this wonderful group of parents that they also needed social and emotional support, that they didn't recognize their own leadership skills. I always admire a mother of 7 that can raise a family, be the leader, be the person, but doesn't equate that to her self-worth, doesn't recognize the skills that she possesses, and that by bringing her and admiring her and respecting her and celebrating her, that she becomes empowered and is now an ally with the school system. We are now 8,000 parents who graduated from the Family Leadership Institute. We decided very early on to have an emotional social component to it and cultural competencies built into it, so that many of our refugee families that are really hard to engage because of sometimes the trauma or the perception that their limited language, whatever that keeps them away. So we developed this curriculum that is very holistic. It's about well-being. It's also about giving them a voice to tell us. When I have a mom who's come from Yemen and she's made it over 10,000 miles to land in Omaha, Nebraska, and to tell us of the resiliency and what kept her going. Those are the type of characteristics that we want them to translate to their children as well. This resiliency, we are here because we've been given an opportunity. So at the end of the year that we do the program, the FLI, we have an institute in Vegas where I live. Some of us do live in Vegas. And there they get to visit many other districts who may be in the second phase already, which is called the train the trainer phase. We believe very strongly in building capacity. We don't want to be another flavor of the month kind of thing, where we want to have sustainability. In some school districts, we're way over our 10th year. So we've seen 800 families come through. But I also want to encourage everyone to think non-traditionally about engaging parents. The PTA is a great model, but it doesn't necessarily is designed for at the get-go to get some of our immigrant families and refugee families engaged. I think that we need to recognize that there's trauma that does exist in many of our families. There's also the language issue. So the Family Leadership Institute was, for me, what I wished my parents had gone through. That my mother's feeling guilty about her mental illness and her feeling that she hadn't done much with her life still hurts today. I think that if she had been in this type of a setting, we would have celebrated her and all that she did holistically. Our strength is from her example. Our resiliency was her still getting up in the morning and doing what she had to do to raise 10 kids. So I think there are many families today in America that want, certainly every family wants their children to succeed. The fact that they don't enter the building of a school or enter school and become engaged right away are sometimes misperceived or misunderstood. And we want to get rid of those perceptions. Parents instinctively, I think, do care for their kids.
Sure.
They do. And yet sometimes I hear that negativity from schools that say, well, we did everything and no one came. And my question is, what is everything? What does that mean? Like today at the conference, I just gave some very quick ideas to break the recruiting efforts of bringing parents in.
As a school leader, I've always been interested in this topic of resiliency, because we would encounter many children who had such burdens in their lives and still succeeded and grew up to make a big difference in life. How can you teach resiliency, or how can you develop a culture or climate that allows that to flourish in children, particularly those who have needs unlike some others?
There's one particular program that we designed because we discovered that resiliency is a learned behavior. Some people say, well, that kid just came with that in them. And so what we do, for example, in the Be the One, and I would encourage others to do the same, is I always link the story of their parents and what they had to do to be where they're at today. And then I help kids make that connection with understanding that story, all of it, the sacrifice, the displacement. I had a young student say to me, well, my mom moved 8 times. And I said, but every time did she find a place for you? Oh, yeah. Sometimes it was with a friend, but she found a place. I said, where do you think that came from? Her finding it. It was because she wanted to find you a place no matter what. And that's called resilience. And so all of a sudden you see young people, 2 things happen. They become grateful instead of feeling that they've been victimized. My mom didn't love me, she always took me here, she took me there, to she did the best she could, and guess what? She found a place. So the gratefulness of not being abandoned, not being forgotten, now they internalize that differently. And so I had a young man not too long ago up in the migrant communities of Washington State, had this deep, deep resentment for being the translator in his family and for being the person that was the go-between the school system and he just really, really was, oh, it's always me. I'm the one at the grocery store. I'm the one at the hospital. And he went on and on and on. And I said, but let me talk about where would you be if your parents had not chosen to go through what they went through? For you now to be bilingual and to be in a school that obviously has a place for you and has high expectations for you. Take me back to where would you be had they not done what they did? And I said, how far did they come from? And he began to cry. He said, 5,000 miles. I said, and how do you think they did that? What do you think kept them going? He talked about how they would sleep at rest stops because there was just no money for any hotel. There were a couple of times the car broke down and he remembered that his father used a coat hanger to start the car, but never said, we're going back. It was always about going forward. And one of the things we do in our social emotional program is, it's called a letter to the parent. And so they get to write from a point of being grateful. So he came into the program very resentful, wanting to run away, sick and tired of being the one and all that. To being the one, as the program calls, that actually is grateful. So he wrote the letter to his parents apologizing. And as he was writing, you could tell he was processing. He was going to a very deep place. Later on, he brought his parents. And he was just beaming. And he said, this is mi mamá, este es mi papá. And the woman, had baked something for me because she said that her son had a whole different behavior towards them. And that they knew that they were imposing on him. And that they wanted to learn English so that he wouldn't be taken out. And they knew that they were putting on him an additional burden. But he also then knew that they had actually made that sacrifice themselves. So I think what happens with a lot of our young people, they don't make that connection. Even third generation kids that are just spoiled. I mean, they're just entitled. I mean, they just think everybody's going to give them a car and a cell phone, and so I work with them as well because I see that they're going on this trail of instant gratification, and you owe me. So I have a special message for them too.
You want to tell us?
Well, sometimes I can be a little tough. I tell them, I say, well, who does all these things for you? And they'll tell me, well, who else? Because you can tell they even have a little attitude. My mother. I go, okay, well, let me tell you something. What happens if your mom's not there tomorrow? Something tragic happens. What are you going to say about your mom? Who she was, what she did for you. And it really shakes them to the core. Because in their mind, it's always a one-way situation. And it's a given. Go home, I expect to see my mother. I need something, my mother's going to make it happen. So when I take away that false sense of security, they begin to then question, so what am I going to do? I go, so are you going to your uncle? Are you going to your... No. Are they going to be as giving and as patient? No. I said, so why don't you treasure what you have right now? I said, and I tell them, I'm an orphan. I'll never, ever see those hands again. Make not one tortilla ever. I will never see my father again. No. I have memories. So I convey that to them. And they begin to recognize. I said, so make memories now. And start with the words, thank you. So it's interesting to see even the third generation student socially and emotionally understand. They are here for a purpose, not just to consume. And I think we need to teach them purpose, meaning, other than just consumption and entitlement.
Well, as you said, your message is very important for all of us. So I would like you to tell everybody how they can contact you.
Oh, well, thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity first, and I thank you, the viewer, wherever you're at. Our web is www.easleadership.com. That's www.easleadership.com. And our toll-free number is 1-888-354-4747. 1-888-354-4747. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
And I thank you
And
too.
I thank you, my friend.
And I invite you all to bring Consuelo into your school's life as well, because I think it will make a significant difference. And we're so delighted that she spent time with us today.
Thank you, my friend. That's very kind.
Thank you.